They kidnapped the wrong woman in Apache territory, they didn't know who would come for her. They took her at the narrow wash where the mesquite grows thin and the land opens just enough to make a man believe he is unseen. It was late afternoon, the sun already lowering itself with the patience of something that had watched centuries pass. She rode alone, her pace measured, her eyes forward. No escort. No weapon in sight. Nothing to suggest she was protected. That was why they chose her. 3 men came out of the rocks without raising their voices. This was not rage. This was work. One took her reins. Another took her wrists. The third watched the horizon, certain no one would come. She did not scream. She did not beg. That unsettled them more than resistance would have. They bound her and turned her horse loose. Dust followed them west as they rode, steady and unhurried, believing Apache territory had grown quiet enough to forget itself. At the crossing, an old trader watched the last of the dust fade. He said nothing aloud. But after they were gone, he removed his hat and whispered a warning to the empty land. Some women are not meant to be taken. By morning, the taking had already changed shape. Stories move differently in the territory. They do not travel fast, but they travel true. By the time the sun stood high, men along the trails had begun to speak in careful fragments. A woman taken near the wash. Riders heading west. No shots fired. No struggle. That last detail mattered. At a trading post 2 days' ride away, a mule skinner paused mid-sentence and lowered his voice. He said the woman matched the description of someone who carried messages between camps, not written, never spoken twice the same way. Someone watched, even when she appeared alone. Another man corrected him. Not messages, he said. Blood. She was kin to a line that did not bend easily. Raised under an old discipline. Protected by an oath that did not require witnesses. They spoke one name between them. Only once. Like striking flint and quickly pulling the hand away. The land itself seemed to answer. A small camp was found abandoned near the dry creek. Fire cold. Food untouched. Horses gone, their tracks turned sharply south as if their riders had decided not to wait for daylight. Ravens gathered where no carrion lay. Men riding the trails felt watched and could not say why. The kidnappers felt none of this. They rode on, confident in the weight of their arrangement. There was a town across the line that paid well for silence and delivered profit without questions. A place where law wore a badge but served a ledger. Women passed through there and did not return, and no one came asking. They believed they were nearing the end of their trouble. What they did not understand was that the taking had already ended something else. The land had begun to remember. The town sat low against the earth, as if it knew it did not deserve to be seen from a distance. Its buildings leaned inward, close enough to hear each other breathe. The streets were wide but never clean. Every man there knew who owned what, and how much silence was worth. Nothing happened in that town by accident. The woman was not taken to the jail. She was taken behind it. A clerk wrote her name wrong on purpose. The stable hand locked the gate and took his pay. The sheriff turned his chair toward the window and watched dust move along the road while men did business behind him. This was how it always worked. No single man carried the blame. It was spread thin, like grease on a blade. By nightfall, wagons stood ready at the edge of town. Not one. 3. Destinations unspoken. Routes memorized. Buyers already waiting somewhere beyond the hills. That was when the first rider appeared. He did not come down the main road. He stood where the town thinned into scrub, still enough to be mistaken for a fence post if a man did not look twice. His horse did not shift. No campfire burned. Before midnight, 2 more shapes joined him. Then another. They arrived without sound, without greeting. No council was held. None was needed. The men in town began to feel it then, not fear exactly, but the absence of comfort. Dogs refused to bark. Cards went unplayed. A saloon girl crossed herself without knowing why. Someone whispered the name. No one answered. This was no rescue riding in. This was the reckoning of a system that had been allowed to live too long. The first door came apart just before dawn. No warning knock. No shouted order. The wood split clean where the latch met the frame, and the man inside had just enough time to understand that something older than law had found him. There was no chase through the streets. No wild firing. Each movement had been decided long before the riders reached the edge of town. 1 man to the stables. 1 to the wagons. 2 to the rooms behind the jail. Violence came swift and finished where it began. A single shot. A blade used once. A man pulled from sleep and left where he fell. Nothing wasted. Nothing repeated. The sheriff reached for his gun and stopped halfway. The rider standing in his doorway did not raise a weapon. He did not need to. You were paid, the rider said quietly. The sheriff lowered his hand. He was left alive to remember why. Behind the jail, the woman heard the lock break. She stood before the door opened, already knowing who had come. When she stepped into the light, she did not run. She nodded once, the way people do when a debt has been honored. By sunrise, the wagons burned slow at the edge of town. Ledgers curled into ash. The men who had kept the system fed lay still, their work ended with them. The riders were gone before the smoke thinned. The town remained, but something essential had been taken from it. It would never trade the same way again. The smoke from the wagons drifted east for most of the morning, thin and unwilling, as if the land itself did not care to hold it. By midday, the town began to move again. Men stepped into the streets and spoke in careful tones. No one asked questions that required answers. The sheriff stayed inside, his badge untouched, his hands shaking only when he thought no one could see. By evening, 3 families had packed what they could carry and left without saying where they were headed. The trade did not return. Routes shifted. Buyers found other places and discovered they were no longer welcome there either. Word traveled the old way, not by posters or warrants, but by men choosing not to stop, by wagons turning around before reaching the first building. As for the woman, she was seen once more on the trail before the season changed. Riding alone again. Unbound. Unhurried. Those who passed her said the land felt steadier in her presence, as if something had been set back into place. No marker was raised for what happened in that town. None was needed. The elders would speak of it years later, when younger men asked why certain roads were avoided and certain bargains never made. They would say some crimes awaken forces that do not argue, do not negotiate, and do not announce themselves twice. They would say Apache territory is patient. And that when the wrong woman is taken, the land answers, not with fury, but with correction. Then they would fall silent, letting the quiet carry the rest of the story.